Do tigers know what they look like? Do you know what a tiger looks like? Well, to answer a question about what something looks like and how we see it, we really need to think about light and color. By the way, before we get too far into things, I just want you to know I've hidden this picture of a goat somewhere in the video. See if you can find it. Anyway, in my last video, I talked a little bit about light, and I got one important thing wrong. Definitely more than one thing. I've been keeping a list. Okay, not the point. What I wanted to say is that I should not have made the claim that I'm pretty sure I know what light emitting means when there's so much that I still don't know about light. Now, I've started my own personal deep dive into the subject of light, which has been very exciting and rewarding, and I hope someday to have a more in-depth video all about light in general, but in this video I wanted to focus just on color, and we'll start with the primary colors. Do you know what the primary colors are? And would you bet money on your answer? If you're anything like me up until recently, you may say that the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue.
Blue in a frame.
Yes. But it's not accepted as the actual set of primary colors. So what are the primary colors? Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. For instance, if you were to ask a television about the primary colors, it's going to tell you red and green and blue. And you can tell because each individual pixel on the screen is made up of separate lights, which are red, green, or blue, and they each light up by different amounts depending on what color the overall pixel is supposed to be. But if you were to ask a printer the same question, printer? Oh, we don't have a printer. I'm just gonna look it up. Turns out that printer ink refills have the answer, and the primary colors to a printer are cyan, yellow, and magenta, which I know feels an awful lot like the red, yellow, blue thing from earlier, but just in like cursive or something, but it's an important distinction. In this color scheme, they also tend to throw in black, which is considered a key, and so then the acronym becomes CYMK. So why this distinction? Why are there two different sets of primary colors? Isn't life complicated enough? Well, really it all comes down to what's happening when different colors mix together. And the real distinction here is between additive and subtractive color mixing. If you caught the words add and subtract in there, then gold star for you. Additive is the game that TVs and other screens like to play with the red, green, blue color model, and it involves mixing different colors of light. But subtractive is for things like paints and inks and other things known as pigments that get mixed together using the cyan, yellow, magenta color scheme. And in my opinion, additive is easier to wrap your head around, so we're actually going to start there. So additive color mixing is really all about taking two or more colors of light and shoving them into the same place like your eyeball. But it's important to note that it's actually different colors of light that are being mixed. Now, to demonstrate this for yourself, it would require the use of advanced technologies like flashlights and children's Picasso tiles. But under the right conditions, you can try it too. Let's take an example of mixing red and green light together. When these two colors of light are forced to hang out with one another, they actually produce something brand new that wasn't there before. When you're seeing this happen, really your eyes are still taking in both original colors independently. It's just that your brain knows a thing or two about playing tricks on you for your own convenience. Now, speaking of the brain's involvement, let's take a brief little detour here before we eventually get into subtractive color mixing. The whole red, green, blue color scheme is essentially what your brain uses to produce the experience that you call vision. And it does this through the eye. Let's look at the eye, or at least this poor diagram of one. The different parts of the eye fit into two main categories. One category being the stuff I don't care about for this video, and the other category being the thing I do care about, which is called the retina. The retina contains these specialized cells called rods and cones, which are labeled on the screen, but you should really be able to tell which one's which by simple geometry. The cones perceive color, and we as humans, and I'm making an assumption here that you're human, we have 3 different types of color receptors in our eyes, and each type is specialized to perceive a certain color. Some for red, some for green, and some for blue. And because we have these 3 different color receptors, we're said to have trichromatic vision. You trichromat, you. Now, how this all works is that, for example, when red light enters your eye, the red sensitive cones get all excited about it and tell the brain that redness is happening, but the green and blue ones really just don't give a f***. But how do we see other colors, like yellow? Well, it turns out that yellow light gets both the red and green cones equally excited, and then this red-green signal is sent to the brain. And if the brain doesn't find it handsome, it'll at least find it yellow. Let me know in the comments if you got that reference. From how I understand how these cones interact with the brain really doesn't care if it's truly a pure yellow signal that's exciting the red and green ones, or if it is this combination of red and green. In either case, the brain's just gonna find out that yellowness is happening. So anyway, back on track. Additive color mixing is just that. It's the mixing together or adding of light together to get new colors. So what's subtractive color mixing and how is it different? Well, with subtractive color mixing, in the end, you're still going to be perceiving different colors of light into your eye, but what's important is what's happening to the light before it makes its way to your eye. With something like paint, and we'll take a cyan paint, or at least the closest I could figure out how to mix. I'm not good at this. I don't know how to do that. I just tried it. It's supposed to be cyan. What happens with it is, let's say we were shining white light at this cyan paint. And by the way, white light is just like a rainbow in a trench coat. So like white light is just all of the colors of light piled together in one place, which is additive color mixing. The white light hits the cyan paint and you see it as cyan, but only because every other color of light, pretty much, gets absorbed. So most colors of light get absorbed by the cyan paint, and it reflects overwhelmingly cyan and a little bit of some other stuff, but you see cyan because it's so overwhelmingly. I just said that twice. And the same thing happens if we take yellow paint. Yellow paint absorbs pretty much everything but yellow. Overwhelmingly, yellow is reflected back to your eye, but all the other colors get absorbed, except trace amounts of other stuff. Now, if we were to mix the cyan and yellow paints together, you end up with green, which is neither cyan nor yellow, and that makes sense when you think about what each of them is absorbing. The cyan paint is really good at absorbing most colors of light, including yellow, and the yellow paint is really good at absorbing most colors of light, including cyan. So when you mix them together, you have a mixture that now absorbs cyan and absorbs yellow, and so neither of those colors are reflected back to your eye. And what's left? A little bit of the other stuff that neither paint absorbed in the first place, and you get green. And so that's how subtractive color mixing works. Now, all this talk about colors in general has probably left you with one question. Why do tigers dress in such obnoxiously bright colors when they're supposed to be sneaky? Well, that loops back and ties back into how eyes work. I found this really interesting to learn about. Remember, we have trichromatic vision. We have 3 color receptors in our eyes. It turns out that a lot of the prey that tigers would hunt, like different types of deer and antelope, boars and things like that, have what's called dichromatic vision. So they only have 2 different color receptors in their eyes, and compared to us, the one that they're missing is the red one, which takes away their ability to see things like red and orange. And when I learned about this, the first thing that I wanted to do was take a clip of a tiger and remove all the red to see how a deer or an antelope or a boar would see it. Now, this time of year, there's a distinct lack of tigers roaming around in my backyard, so we're just gonna have to improvise. I'm gonna take this guy right here and then give him some greenery to hide in like this. And what you may notice is that he still stands out quite a bit. But that's because you have trichromatic vision. If we were to take this same clip and then just strip out all of the red, do more of like a dichromatic vision, this is what he's gonna look like. And that is much better camouflage than it was before. Now, interestingly, tigers also, speaking of tigers, hey, tigers apparently also have dichromatic vision, and so they would see themselves the same way that those prey would see them. So to answer the original question, do tigers know what they look like? I'm going with no. I don't think they do, because they don't know that they're orange. But then, do we know that they're orange? Sure, we have our 3 fancy color receptors in our eyes giving us trichromatic vision, but who's to say that trichromatic vision is correct? I mean, after all, look at the mantis shrimp. Those guys have got 16 different receptors in their eyes, and they're capable of seeing things we can't even imagine being able to see. My favorite thing about the mantis shrimp is that apparently there's research that shows that their brains are too tiny to properly make use of all of the information that comes from their eyes, so they're still not very good at telling different colors apart. So much wasted potential! Anyway, that's all that I have for this video. Thanks for watching.